Alrighty, welcome back to Learning Japanese by Translating in Manga, this time with 100% more Pokemon. So let's go ahead and actually get some Pokemon up on the screen. Now that we have an idea of where we are, we're going to go ahead and start tackling this box right here, starting with a pretty fun word. So the first word that we see here is kusol. Now, the actual word is just kusol, so that's how we're going to write it here. Kuso is quite literally the word for crap. You can think of it as a Japanese swear word if you want to. It literally does refer to poop, and it is used the same way that in English we would say crap, or another word that I'm sure you can use your imagination to figure out. Now, some other places will translate it as things like damn or hell, because again, it is basically used as an expletive to show that you are upset with a situation. But because the word is literally the word for poop, we're going to keep it here. Now you can tell that the character is using it slightly differently here because there's a U at the end. This is something that you need to get used to when it comes to Japanese writing. The Japanese will often have written ways of showing emotion for their characters within a manga. So, for example, if you see an elongated sound, like the O sound being elongated within U, then the word isn't just kuso, it's kuso. It's like, ah, darn cheese crud. They're basically trying to get across the point that the character is exclaiming it, or they are very, very frustrated when they say it. It's not just a bland kuso, it's kuso. They're really, really getting across the fact that they're emotional about whatever they're talking about. Mata, very simple word. It means again. So the verb of the sentence, whatever it is, it either will happen again or has happened more than once. Now, here's where things get fun. The word that we have here is hajiku. The word hajiku means to knock away or to deflect something. So basically, if you throw something at something else and it bounces off, that is hajiku. Hajiku is when you either knock something away or it just does not hit the thing that you wanted to hit because it got bounced off or deflected or something. But in addition to that, you'll notice that we've got a couple of endings that we have to talk about here, so let's go ahead and talk about them. So our very first ending here is going to be what we call the ra re ru ending, aka known as the passive form. What this basically does is it changes the sentence from something that the subject is doing into something that is being done to the subject of the sentence. Now, this is a very, very unique case because usually, if you are doing something to something, there is a separate particle that you need to use in order to show that. But because the subject is the one that this is being done to, you actually can show this by just using the ga particle. Okay, so last time we talked, I gave you a few practice words in order to practice your verb conjugation. I gave you a group 1 verb, a group 2 verb, and a group 3 verb. So going forward, when I need to show you how conjugation works, I'm going to use these 3 words here in order to show you. Let's go ahead and start with group 1. So group 1 is going to be nomu here, so to drink. But if we want to make it passive, step 1 will be to change this or shift this character into its a member. So instead of no mu, we'll be using no ma. Now, in addition to this, we are going to need to attach an ending. You'll notice I've got the ra here in little parentheses. That's because when you are doing this with group 1, you actually don't need the sound ra. The a ending character that you shift into is going to be the replacement for ra. So no ma re ru is going to be to get drank, right? So the subject of the sentence got or will get drank. So here on the bottom, as you can see, this is the word for coffee in Japanese, kohi. Kohi ga nomareru is the sentence the coffee gets drank or the coffee will get drank. This is another interesting thing about passive in English, and again, this is an English thing, not a Japanese thing. In English, we often show passive form by saying the word get or will be, and then we use the past tense version of the word. So you're going to notice that a little bit when we get a little bit further here. So with a group 2 verb, what we're going to do is drop the ru, like I talked about before. So that's going to disappear. And then we'll attach the ra, the re, the ru, just like it's written. Taberareru. So if taberu means to eat, taberareru would be to get eaten. Once again, you'll notice that this is going to be its past tense form, eaten, and then getting eaten. Or we can say something like to be eaten also works here too, but to keep it symmetrical here, we'll keep it as get eaten. So here we are with another one. The word sushi should be pretty easy to figure out what that means in Japanese because it is Japanese. Sushi ga taberareru would mean that the sushi will be eaten or that the sushi gets eaten. Now, as is the case for group 3 verbs, we are going to change this entire thing out, do a full makeover, and do something completely unique with it. So instead of suru, it is going to become sareru. The sa here keeps the motif of being in the a family, just like with ra up here, or the character here, ma. And once again, we notice that when we translate this into English, it is to get or to be, and then the past tense of do, which is done. So once again, to show a little example down here on the bottom, the first word there is kaji. Kaji means like household chores or like household work. So things like doing the dishes and the laundry and so on and so forth. Kaji, don't worry about memorizing it. It's not part of our word list. But kaji ga sareru. Sareru means that the chores will get done or the chores will be done. Now that we're on the topic, I'm going to talk about one more thing when it comes to group 1 verbs. This is a group 1 verb exclusive quirk. If you have a character like this at the end of your verb, so for example, a word like kau is going to be a good example of this. Kau means to buy something, but don't worry about that right now. If you have a verb like this, group 1, because it ends in an u, just like this, if you need to shift a character that ends in this specific character, I cannot stress this enough, ends in this specific character, u, it cannot shift into the character a, like you would normally expect. So with this one particular, it's one little kink in the machine, but it throws people off, and it's something you should get used to really early. In a case like this, kau means to buy something. If we wanted to say to be bought, we would not actually shift this to a. In any case where you need to shift the u character to its a member, you need to shift it to wa. Again, this is every single time it needs to shift into its a character, and passive is not the only time where this will need to be done. So get used to this as early as possible. U shifts into wa, not a. The reason this is so frustrating is because you can use every other character. You can say kau, you can say kai, you can say kae, and you can say kao. This is the only time shift into wa, not shift into a. Now for our last ending, we are going to talk a little bit about the ta form. The ta form is the Japanese past tense. So it turns eat into ate, drink into drank, so on and so forth. Now, as is the want for group 1 verbs, it's going to be a little bit more complicated than conjugating other types of verbs. So, group 1 ta form. There are 5, count them, 5 different ta forms that group 1 verbs can change into, depending on which specific character the group 1 verb ends in. Now, this is a little bit of a double-edged sword because obviously it's a little bit annoying to have to learn each and every one of the individual endings you can possibly turn into a ta form. But on the other hand, if you happen to see a word in its ta form in a manga or in an anime, then it will be extremely obvious what the base version of that word is, because there are only a few things that can get you to that specific ending. So ending 1 is going to be the small tsu plus ta, or the ta ending. This is going to be the endings u, ru, and tsu. So as an example, ka-u will turn into ka-ta. Tsukuru will turn into su-ku-ta. Tatsu will turn into ta-ta. Don't worry about what these words mean for right now. Just recognize the pattern. U, ru, tsu become ta. Ending 2 is nda. So nda comes from words that end in mu, nu, or bu. This one looks a little bit annoying at first, but I've got a trick that it's a little bit weird. I don't know how much it'll actually help you, but I'm going to show it to you. So to keep these particular 3 separate from the others, if you look down at your keyboard right now, you'll notice that the B, N, and M are all right next to each other by pure coincidence. Just try to remember that those are the 3 families that turn into nda in their past tense. So, for example, asobu turns into asonda. Shinu becomes shinda. Nomu becomes nonda. Nda, nda, nda. Bu, nu, and mu. The last 3 endings are only ever going to be associated with one character, so they should be a teeny tiny bit easier to remember. The ending ku turns into ita. So the word kaku can become kaita. Kaita. Next ending is going to be gu. Gu turns into ida. Now, of course, if you've already learned your hiragana, this one should actually come as a pretty obvious one. If ku turns into gu by taking dakuten, then ita turning into ida should also make sense because ku becomes gu in this case. So oyogu turns into, pretty obviously, oyoida. Okay, take a breath. Last group 1 ta ending is going to be su, turning into shita, or shita in some cases. So su becomes shita. So here we are with a word, hana su. Su becomes shita, and we have hanashita. Now, this is a little bit unfair here, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about it right now. Hanashita is the way this word should be pronounced, technically speaking, if you were to read it exactly how it's written. But do know that in modern day Japanese, there are some characters like i and u that can become silent within a word if they're words that are used regularly enough. So the su here, turning into shita, is actually going to become something a little bit closer to shita if you want to sound more natural. So hanashita is going to be the word rather than hanashita, even though that's not technically wrong. Now, when it comes to group 2, forget all of that nonsense. Forget all of it. It's super simple. Once again, group 2 likes to drop the ru from the end of the word and then put the ending on. It's the ta ending, so it's just going to be ta. That's it. Taberu becomes tabeta, and this happens with every single group 2 verb. Okay, so let's get the weirdo out of the way. Suru becomes shita. That's it. The word suru becomes shi, and then you add the ta, just like you do with group 2. Suru becomes shita. Kind of funny how this entire word becomes one of the group 1 endings, but I digress. You'll be able to tell them apart, I promise. Okay, surely that has to be it, right? That has to be it for the explanations. But no, there's actually one more thing that we're going to talk about here, and that is an interesting little development with words. Let's go ahead and take a look at a group 1 word, like nomu. Now, nomu, as we just said, is a group 1 verb. So if I want to make it into its passive form, do you remember how I do that? it's going to be to shift this into its a character, no ma, and then add re, ru. And this changes the word from meaning to drink into to be drank or to get drunk, right? Well, if we want to now change this word into its past tense, I mean, surely we're talking about a group one verb here, right? So surely we're going to have to use a group one past tense ending. Since it's ru, it's going to turn into ta, correct? Not exactly. So here's the fun thing about using multiple conjugations at once in Japanese. It only ever matters what the current state of the word is. And what that means is this word, despite starting out as a group one word, if you'll notice, now looks a little bit different. It ends with that edu sound, right? So even though we started this word as a group one verb, it currently doesn't look like a group one verb, does it? It looks a little bit like a group two verb, and that's because that's exactly what it is. When you conjugate a word with a brand new ending, the ending can sometimes change what group the word is in. Now, luckily, this normally only ever happens one way. Group two verbs pretty much never turn into group one verbs, but sometimes group one verbs will turn into group two verbs. This is the reason you need a sort of strong foundational Japanese, because sometimes when weird stuff like this happens, you need something to reach back into and pull some knowledge from. So completely ignore the word nomu for a second. Just look at the word nomareru. This word follows our conditions for being a group 2 verb. So from this point on, if it needs to conjugate, we will just treat this one word as a group 2 verb and do whatever a group 2 verb would do. So if we need to turn this into its past tense and say got drank or was drank, then we treat this as group 2 by dropping the ru and attaching ta. Booyah. Nomareta would be got drank. So reaching into our example here, kohi ga nomareta would mean the coffee got drank, right? Ta gives us our past tense, mare gives us our passive, and no is the sound for drinking. So the coffee got drank. Alrighty, that was pretty beefy, right? But hopefully you're having a bit of fun. Don't forget, you can hit me up in the comments section below if you have any questions or need me to elaborate on anything, and I do offer private tutoring lessons if you would like me to go over any more of this with you in the future. But for right now, I think we're about ready to move on. Okay, so starting off with our first sound here, we've got the sound yosh. Yosh is pretty equivalent to something like okay or all right in English. It's basically like pumping yourself up for something or like getting psyched, getting ready for something. Once again, though, I would like to point out that even though the basic word is yosh, this word is yosh. We are once again elongating the word yosh in order to show the character's current state of emotions. So this character is not just saying okay or all right. This character is getting really excited for what's about to happen. Not just okay, not just all right, but like, all right. Okay, and we can get that through the text itself thanks to the Japanese use of showing emotion through their character's text. Okay, this next word here, kondo. Kondo. First character kon, second character do. This is a very, very simple one. Kon is another word that you may have seen before that basically means now or right now, and do is how you count how many times something normally happens. However, in this case, we're talking about the time that happens right now. So, in other words, this is a word meaning this time. Because we're talking about the time that happens right now, it is this time. All right, here we are. The dreaded wa particle, pronounced as wa, even though it is written as ha. Why does this happen? To this day, I still don't have a good answer for that, but just know that even though it is written as ha, it is read as wa. So let's talk about this for a second. In my personal opinion, I think the wa particle is one of the worst taught concepts in the entire Japanese language. People overcomplicate this particle a lot. Its meaning is incredibly simple. The only time it should ever get more complicated than that is in its actual usage. But let's talk about what it means first. Let's say for a second that you're looking at this sentence right here. Oh wow, it's so cute. This is a full English sentence. It is perfectly grammatically correct, and it is a sentence that you will hear often. But what exactly am I calling cute? The answer, of course, is that without the context, we have no idea. We're actually using the word it as a stand-in for the fact that in order for this sentence to make sense, we're supposed to know what it is already referring to. Okay, now let's say hypothetically I were to show you this picture. In fact, I'll take this picture and put it right next to the sentence that we wrote earlier, okay? Now when I say the sentence out loud, oh wow, it's so cute. What am I referring to? Right? Obviously, now that I've given you some context as to what it is it refers to within the sentence, you understand that this dog, even though I didn't say the word dog or puppy or anything of the sort, is the thing that I'm referring to as cute, right? This is what the wa particle does in Japanese. The wa particle is what we call here not the topic particle, because that's a silly name for it. It is the context particle. Called so because the word that it's attached to is giving us the context for the rest of the sentence. What that means is you can actually translate the full sentence without the word attached with wa. But by understanding what word is attached to wa, the rest of the sentence makes more sense. What I'm basically saying is the wa particle gives the person you're talking to, or the reader in this case, a focal point that makes the rest of the sentence make sense. So, if you say the wa particle, it's the equivalent of holding up a picture of the thing you're talking about as you talk. Very, very simple in concept, but its usages are where things can get a little bit more complicated. There are a couple of reasons why you would want to state or clarify the context of what you're saying before you say the actual sentence itself. In some cases, it's going to be to show a difference between this thing that you're now about to talk about and the thing that you were talking about previously. In some cases, it's going to be that you want to say the word once and then not continuously say it over and over again. This is an example that the lovely and glorious Dolly-sama has given us that I would like to show you here. When Mary got home, Mary took Mary's luggage into Mary's house. Now, I'd like to ask you, grammatically speaking, what is wrong with this sentence? The correct answer is that there is nothing wrong grammatically with this sentence. However, is this a natural English sentence that you would normally say out loud? Probably not, right? Even though it is technically correct, it is not the way that we would actually say it, right? Think in your head for a second how we would say this exact sentence in English. Okay, hopefully it looked a little bit like this. When Mary got home, she took her luggage into her house. Now, when we refer to Mary, the first time we use Mary's name. Every other time that we want to refer back to Mary, we do so by instead referring to her with a pronoun, she, her, her. So, in Japanese, you are normally going to use the wa particle once to clarify what it is you're talking about, and then stop referring back to the thing you're talking about, which is why you don't continuously get was. But when you're ready to talk about something new, you are going to use the wa particle to start a new conversation about the new thing if you want to stop talking about the old thing that you were talking about previously. But by using it that one time, you don't have to continuously keep saying the thing that you're talking about. That's the normal new usage for the wa particle. In this case, though, it's actually being used more for the first example I gave, where it's being used to clarify that we're talking about this time as opposed to another time. So when you're using it like this, again, we can take the kondo and the wa out of this sentence completely. We don't even need it, and we can translate it without it. And then this is just giving us the context for what the rest of the sentence means. So let's go ahead and keep going for right now. Now, here's a word you're probably sick of seeing, watashi. Watashi is, of course, how you refer to yourself. It can be I or me, depending on the context. So we've already talked about the no particle. We're going to move on to the word ban. Ban is normally associated with a number and basically talks about numbers happening within a sequence. But when you're talking about it in terms of a person or a character, you can think of it as that person's number, right? So an easier way to think of it in this context is it means someone's turn. So if we're talking about a turn that belongs to I or me, it becomes pretty easy to see that the turn we're talking about is my turn. Alrighty, guys, it was another pretty long one today. Very, very proud of you for making it through this. If you understood everything I was talking about, I highly recommend you go back and check some of the things that we were talking about earlier. But we're going to go on to our last concept here, and that is the sentence ending particle this time. That means we're at the end of a sentence here. The yo particle. Yo particle is what I call the exclamation point particle. Some particles just work out really well like that. When you end your sentence with yo, you are essentially asserting it with a level of confidence. You are declaring whatever it is that you just said. So at the end of this, kondo wa watashi no ban yo, this character is either saying it very loudly, which could be the case because there's an exclamation point here in the sentence as well, or they are asserting it with a level of confidence in the group that they're currently in. So you can just think of it as an exclamation point. It's very, very simple to think of it that way because normally in English, when we say something very confidently, it's also shown with an exclamation point, even if we're not necessarily yelling it. So just think of it that way from here on out. Alrighty, guys, we made it to the end of our first conversational speech panel. As always, here are all of the concepts that you need to translate this panel. And go ahead and take a moment to pause the... Alrighty, guys, you made it to the end of your very first speech bubble panel. I'm going to give you a countdown here. I recommend you pause this video, do your best to translate everything that you see on screen using what you've learned so far. I'll see you in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Alrighty, how did your translation turn out? Let's go ahead and see. So I've decided that from now on, I'm going to go ahead and start putting here which translation I'm currently on, just in case anybody missed the orientation video, which if you did, I recommend you go back and you watch it. You're probably missing a ton of context if you haven't seen it, but regardless, I'm going to go ahead and put it here. This is my literal translation. So the first bubble here we've got is crap. It got knocked away again. In this case, considering that Pokemon, brand new concept, we're not supposed to know anything about this world. We're not supposed to know what it is yet, right? We're not supposed to know about the concept of Pokemon and Pokeballs. So it is a perfectly fine pronoun to use here to just show that something that we don't know about yet got knocked away. And then in this second bubble here, we have all right as a stand-in for the sound yosh. And then my turn this time. I tried to keep it as grammatically succinct as possible because you'll notice that there's a lack of grammatical there's a lack of some grammar here that you would normally see if this character was a little bit older. In fact, this is probably a good sign that the characters that we are currently talking about are pretty young because they're actually missing a sound that should be here that isn't here. Okay, possibility 2. So we've cleaned up the text a little bit here by actually including the monster that we're looking at here in the context of, knowing the fact that the monster's probably the thing knocking what we don't know yet as a Pokeball, but is a Pokeball away. By saying it knocked it away again, implying the it first here is the monster, and then the other it is going to be what we later learn is the Pokeball. In this second one here, we didn't do too much to it, but we did include some of the grammar that would have been missing the first time. Honestly, the first time probably would have been a little bit nicer here because, again, it kind of shows the childishness of the characters here who are literal children. But this time, it's my turn is it's a slightly more natural English sentence, but makes the character sound a little bit more grown up than they maybe should. Okay, and the last possibility I'll give you here is a complete English rewrite. Now here, instead of crap, we have the character saying, "Aw, man," and then showing that whatever it is that they're throwing at this creature here bounced off. I think this totally works here because we don't actively know if the character is trying to deflect, like actively doing something to try and knock whatever it is they're throwing at it away. Or if it's just standing there and for whatever reason the thing is just bouncing off of its skin. We don't know if it's actively thwarting it or if it's just the thing that they're trying to do just isn't working. So I think saying that it bounced off is totally fine here since we don't have that context. I think this makes the creature look a little bit more intimidating because maybe it's not even trying and it's still sort of deflecting this thing that whatever the kids are throwing at it is getting, bounced off of it. And then for this second bubble right here, I have step aside. I want to turn. I think this gets across the idea that whoever is speaking at this point wants the person who is currently, taking a turn or currently trying to do whatever they're trying to do to this monster to move so that they can have a chance at doing whatever it is they're trying to do. Once again, we're coming into this knowing what Pokemon is. Normally, you wouldn't really have that context without reading the full thing, but basically, this character is trying to get the current person to stop trying to catch the Pokemon so that they can try themselves. So I think step aside is a good way to get that across. And then, I want to turn is something that I can imagine a kid yelling, and we know that these are children talking.